What does the drummer for a legendary band like Death have in common with a prank call that makes you cry with laughter? Well, that's the wild story of Richard Christy and how he pulled off what might be the craziest career change in rock and roll history. This is how a guy went from being one of the most respected death metal drummers on the planet, touring the world with bands like Iced Earth and Death, to a writer and on-air prankster for one of the most controversial radio shows of all time. It's a journey from blast beats to total comedian bedlam. And I have to say, as a former massive Howard Stern fan, Richard Christy to this day is one of my favorite people on the show. So I've been dying to do this story for quite a while. Before he was playing for 40,000 screaming metal fans in Europe, and long before the chaos of the world's most infamous radio show, there was just a kid on a farm. Thomas Richard Christy Jr. was born on April 1st, 1974, and he grew up in the tiny town of Redfield, Kansas. It was a place that he described as being in the middle of nowhere, a quiet backdrop for what would become a very loud future. Like a lot of kids back then, his world was blown wide open by music. His aunt introduced him to Kiss and Meatloaf, but it was a neighbor who handed him the album that would set his destiny, Quiet Riot's Metal Health. He soon followed that up with Twisted Sister's Stay Hungry and Iron Maiden's Power Slave. But it was another group that got him into drumming, and that was Van Halen. Richard, at the age of 10, heard the band's song Hot for Teacher. He was hooked on Alex Van Halen's drumming, and a mission was born. Richard joined the elementary school band and spent every afternoon practicing in his room, trying to sound like his hard rock heroes on his $100 drum kit. This wasn't just some phase, it was a calling. As he got older, his passion only grew from there. Just a week before he was supposed to start college and major in music, an opportunity came up that changed his life forever. One of his favorite local bands, Public Assassin, needed a drummer. After nailing the audition in August of '92, he made the choice that kind of seemed crazy to everyone who knew him. He ditched college, moved from the family farm into an old warehouse in Missouri, and went all in on music. Of course, the rock and roll dream doesn't always pay the bills. To support himself, Richard learned a trade and became a residential electrician. This was the start of the duality that would define his early career. Long days working with wires and circuits, and long nights mastering his craft on stage. He was living two lives, fueled by a relentless work ethic. That discipline would forge him for the brutal, demanding world he was about to enter. In 1996, he decided to bet on himself, forming his own band, Burning Inside, and making a huge move to Orlando, Florida, which at the time was a thriving heart of the American death metal scene. The farm boy from Kansas was now in the heart of the storm, and his moment was coming. Orlando in the late 90s was like the Silicon Valley of death metal, and Richard showed up at the perfect time. His reputation as a technically gifted and unbelievably fast drummer spread like wildfire. He was a machine playing with power and complexity that few could dream of matching. He toured and played with several notable bands, including Leash Law, but his big break, the one that would cement his name in metal history, came from a chance encounter. Richard was a massive fan of the band Death and its visionary leader, Chuck Schuldiner. He knew every one of their albums, and when he heard through friends that Death was looking for a new drummer, he jumped at the chance. He actually ended up meeting Chuck at a bookstore in Florida. The audition was surreal. It was just him and Chuck in a room together, and he killed it. Richard's skill was undeniable, and he landed the most coveted drumming gig in the entire genre. Joining Death, in his own words, was the springboard that launched his career. He wasn't just keeping time, he was honoring the legacy of legendary drummers who came before him. The result was the 1998 album, The Sound of Perseverance. The record is widely considered a technical death metal masterpiece, and Richard's performance is a massive reason why. To this day, he calls it the album he's most proud of and his greatest drumming achievement. With Death, Richard toured the world. A major highlight was playing the legendary Dynamo Open Air Festival in the Netherlands to a sea of about 35,000 people. He and Chuck also became close friends and formed a second, more melodic band called Control Denied. It was between 1999 and 2004 Richard became one of the most in-demand drummers in the world, joining the powerhouse metal band Iced Earth and juggling his time between multiple high-profile bands at once. He was at the absolute peak of his profession. Imagine it, selling out arenas, being worshipped by your peers, and making music that would inspire a generation. He had made it. But while he was living a public life as a metal god, he was secretly obsessed with something completely different. While Richard was mastering blast beats, another sound had captured his imagination. No, it wasn't music. Starting in 1996, during his days as an electrician in Florida, he became a diehard listener of The Howard Stern Show. He would listen with headphones on every morning religiously while on the job. For millions, like myself, the show was controversial, hilarious, and addictive, and became a morning ritual. The show, a chaotic mix of celebrity interviews, staff drama, and brutally honest humor and discussion, was the total opposite of the dark, serious world of death metal. But it appealed to the side of him that he always loved, comedy. In 1999, his fandom turned into participation. He found the number for the show's answering machine and started sending in his own comedy bits, like voicemail messages and song parodies that showed off his bizarre and brilliant sense of humor. To Richard's shock, they started getting played on the air. Now imagine that feeling. One day you're touring Europe as a metal icon, and the next you're hearing your own goofy song parody broadcast to millions on the biggest radio show in America. My personal favorites were all the parodies he sent in about associate producer Casey Armstrong. These weren't just one-off jokes. Richard was building a secret second resume, one based off pure comedic instinct instead of drumming. He was a regular contributor, a familiar voice to the show's massive audience, even though they had no idea, for the most part, that he was the same guy laying down thunderous beats for Iced Earth and Death, and he was also living in a storage unit in Orlando at the same time. This dual identity was his secret. He was living two completely separate creative lives, and neither world had a clue about the other. He was already a huge success in one industry, but he was quietly and hilariously working his way into another. And in 2004, a surprise opening would give him the most unlikely opportunity of his life. Now, in early 2004, a longtime key member of The Howard Stern Show, stuttering John Melendez, left to be the announcer for Jay Leno's Tonight Show. I have to admit, as someone who's a huge Howard Stern fan, I never understood why Jay Leno hired Stuttering John to begin with. This left a huge hole on the most popular radio show in America. Now, instead of just hiring someone, Howard Stern turned it into a public spectacle, a contest called Get John's Job. Nearly a dozen or so of the show's most talented listener contributors would compete for the position, with the winner chosen by a fan vote. When Richard heard the news, he knew this was his shot. He was on tour with Iced Earth at the time, living a life that thousands of drummers would kill for. But the pull of his other dream was just too strong. In a move that stunned the metal world, he made the gut-wrenching decision to leave the band mid-tour to go for the radio gig. He later explained, "If I didn't try out for the job on Howard Stern, I would regret it every day for the rest of my life." He threw himself into the competition, and for a couple days, each of the contestants would have to prove their worth by delivering everything from comedy bits to guest interviews. Now here's a snippet of Richard taking part in the contest from 2004.
The show all talking like Richard one day.
That Kansan accent?
Yeah, someone was telling me about you. Richard, by the way, is an electrician. He's also a rock drummer. And someone sent me a note, let me see if I find it, that despite the fact that you're in a rock and roll band and everything, you never get laid.
No, actually, I was on the show in Vegas last year. You guys, I played a game of blackjack to try and win a date with a porn star.
Did you win that?
No, unfortunately, I didn't. I busted on blackjack.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, he played.
But I play in a heavy metal band. We're kind of popular. I never really made enough money to just live off the music, and it was pretty much a sausage fest at all of our shows. So
Even though
tough.
Christy is in a band, he tells me he gets no chicks from it. He says the girls aren't into the heavy music he plays, and no girls go to the concerts, so no groupies.
He could get all the guys he wants.
Richard unleashed his full comedic arsenal, prank calls, song parodies, and his unique off-the-wall personality. He came up with some pretty funny games for the staff to play. One was a perversity quiz, but I think my favorite thing that Richard did during that whole week was a segment involving Tom Chiasano, who was the general manager of WXRK. Tom would have the control over the dump button, deciding what was appropriate to make the airwaves and what was not. Now keep in mind, this was in 2004, the same year the whole overreaction to the Janet Jackson Super Bowl incident happened. So bits that Howard was doing a few years ago were no longer allowed to be done anymore. So Richard came up with a list of ideas to do on the show, and he would pitch them to Tom to see if they'd be allowed or not. The staff would have to guess whether Tom would say yes or no. Even though Richard worried he'd actually blown his chance after one of his guest segments fell flat, His creativity and humor, as well as his personality, won everyone over. The contest came down to the wire. When the votes were counted, Richard was declared the winner with 30% of the listener vote.
You came in second place.
The fix is in.
Richard Christy, you have won.
Wow.
As if we all
Two great champions. Richard Christy, I'm going to bring in the people from Trim Spot.
The runner-up, Sal Governale, or Sal the Stockbroker, was so good, he got hired too, and the two would become a legendary comedy duo on the show that endures to this day. So on July 1st, 2004, it was official. Richard Christy, the celebrated death metal drummer, was now a full-time writer and on-air personality for The Howard Stern Show. He traded his drum throne for a writer's chair. He packed up his life in Florida and he moved to New York City to start his new life. The craziest career change in entertainment history was complete. When Richard got to New York City, he walked into a world that couldn't have been more different from life on a tour bus. The Howard Stern Show was a high-pressure, non-stop creative machine, and Richard wasn't some background writer. He was thrown right into the center of the circus. Paired up with fellow winner Sal Governale, he quickly became famous for his outrageous stunts, masterful prank calls, and a total unapologetic lack of shame.
Our guys have the worst hygiene. Like Richard Christy had 12 cavities at one time.
Yeah.
Because like he hadn't gone to a dentist his entire life.
Well, his dad was afraid of dentists.
Richard, I heard you're going to one of them dentists.
Be careful, bud.
Your sister went to one once. That didn't turn out so good.
Richard used to clean his teeth with a towel. Like, like growing up.
They
Like he-
didn't have toothbrushes?
I don't know. But that's what he said. He used to just like wipe them down with a towel.
Why a towel?
When I first got like dental insurance, I went nuts. I had a lot of work to do.
Yeah, I know. Remember when you had 12 cavities?
Yeah,
All
and
at
2
once.
root canals.
They went out of business on your mouth.
No, I was.
That premium went through the roof. Can you imagine?
His job was basically to do anything for the sake of a laugh. This included enduring a full-body bikini wax live on the air, painting his privates to look like a pumpkin for Halloween, and playing Stump the Perv, a trivia game about obscure adult films. The stunts were shocking and often disgusting, but they were always unforgettable. He became a beloved staff member, often orchestrating stunts so wild they put him right in the comedic trenches, alongside the show's infamous whack pack of eccentric regulars. And of course, there were the countless times Richard cried on the air, whether it was over his beloved Kansas City Chiefs losing the Super Bowl or winning the Super Bowl. And my personal favorite was when quarterback Patrick Mahomes was on the air with Richard, and he started crying right in front of him. He also cried when he was in the presence of one of his favorite bands, Metallica.
And they put Richard on with Mahomes, and you started crying to Mahomes. Dude, you are talking to him last night. We were on the phone, and he's like, he worships Lars.
Of course. He's a drummer.
You know?
Howard, I'm gonna right now. That was awesome. I mean, what you got out of them, I have never heard them talk like that to anybody. Like the detail about their songs and about their instruments. That was awesome, Howard. Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you, Robin.
But beyond the physical comedy, his true genius was in his prank calls. The name of his future band, Charred Walls of the Damned, actually came from a series of prank calls he and Sal made to a Christian radio show. Richard's calls were works of performance art featuring a cast of bizarre, perfectly crafted characters designed to confuse and infuriate their targets. Personally, the Tradio calls have been a favorite of mine. He also became the show's unofficial metal ambassador, hosting his own show on SiriusXM called Richard Christy's Heavy Metal Hoedown. He constantly championed his favorite bands on the main show, introducing millions of people to music they'd otherwise never hear.
According to Richard at these Swedish death metal concerts, a lot of the audience gets into a thing that looks like one of those old ships where they chain you and then they make you row.
Really?
And Richard was really excited to get JD in the
boat.
In the boat. I don't even understand what happens. Like, in other words, the audience sits in a boat.
So there's no boat in the crowd. The boat is on stage.
I see.
A Viking ship, because they
Right.
sing about Viking stuff.
Right.
The crowd sits on the floor
Right.
and pretends to row, and they're all in a row, and it looks cool as hell. Oh,
This is
this
them?
song rules. Twilight of the Thunder God.
Is this your favorite?
Oh my God,
favorite.
I'm getting chills right now.
Am I on the floor for this?
The contrast was just insane. This was a guy who had shared stages with the most respected musicians in the world, a drummer whose technical skill was legendary. Now he was making headlines for soiling himself from laughing so hard or prank calling public access TV. To some in the metal community, it was a baffling move, but for Richard, it was a fulfillment of a dream. He is a key creative force on the show that had inspired him for years. He was getting paid to be himself, to be funny, and to push the limits of comedy every single day. So why would someone at the top of their industry trade it all for something so completely different? Well, for Richard, this wasn't a story about burnout or failure. It wasn't about leaving music behind. It was about chasing another equally powerful passion with the same all-or-nothing intensity that made him a world-class drummer. From a young age, Richard's passions for comedy and horror lived right alongside his love of metal. His creative mind never saw a barrier between the genres. He always saw a connection. The decision to leave Iced Earth and try out for the Stern Show came from a deep fear of regret. He knew that if he didn't take that shot, he'd spend the rest of his life wondering what if. He's already achieved one dream, and now the door to another was open. But here's the thing, Richard never actually quit music. He just changed his day job. After joining the Stern Show, he kept practicing drums and for the first time started to seriously write his own music. The stability of his career gave him the freedom to create on his own terms without the constant pressure of a major band's touring and recording cycle. In 2009, 5 years after joining the show, he proved he was far from done with metal. He announced a new band, Charred Walls of the Damned. This was no comedy band. Richard was very clear that he wanted it to be a serious straight-up metal band, and it was. They got signed to Metal Blade Records and have released 3 critically acclaimed albums. Richard has also figured out a way to have it all. He had his dream job in comedy, and he was the leader of his own respected metal band. Richard's journey is more than just a quirky career change. It's a powerful story about refusing to be put in a box. He was a living proof that you can be a world-class artist in one field and be a beloved, outrageous entertainer in another. But what do you guys think? Which part of his story surprises you the most? His leap from metal to radio, or his ability to master both worlds at once? Let me know in the comments section below. And if you guys enjoyed the story, make sure you're subscribed with notifications turned on because you don't want to miss what we have coming up next. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again on Rock and Roll True Stories. Take care.
Well, Rich, this is your dad. I hear you coming home Friday, so I've been catching some snapping turtles on limb lines, so we might just have us some fried snapping turtle and